UFC Fight Night, Ailin versus Craig is this weekend. I'm going to give you a prediction and breakdown of all 13 fights on this card, starting with Christian Leroy Duncan versus Denis Tiuliulin. I am going to go with Christian Leroy Duncan. I was going to choose him anyways against Cesar Almeida, I believe, but Denis Tiuliulin did come in short notice to fight Christian Leroy Duncan. I'll still kind of just stick with Duncan here. Denis Tiuliulin is super tough. After that last fight against Gregory Rodriguez, I don't know where his durability is necessarily going to look like in this matchup. He is 35 years of age at this point as well, so it's not really looking good for him, especially coming in on short notice. But Christian Leroy Duncan lost to Armen Petrosyan in his last fight after looking really good against Dusko Todorovic. I believe he got injured, a little knee injury, but he was pretty much doing really well, and he looked really good coming into the UFC as well. But I guess he just tried to do too much against Armen Petrosyan, and Petrosyan's very good on the feet, very dangerous on the feet as well, so that's why he ended up getting the win. It was actually really unfortunate because Christian Leroy Duncan actually looked like an idiot because he's very athletic, pretty solid on the ground as well, and very good on the feet and very tricky. Like, he has some really cool moves. He's just doing too much. Like, sometimes you just got to hit the basic stuff to get the points in the fight, but he's just trying to do a bunch of kicks. Like, it just wasn't working on Armen Petrosyan in that fight, so that's why he ended up losing. Hopefully he comes out with a little bit of a smarter tactic. It is Denis Tiuliulin, so he's going to tough it out a little bit, but I think he might be able to get the finish here against Denis Tiuliulin. He does have a 2-inch reach advantage as well. 28 years of age, will be 7 years younger than a 35-year-old Denis Tiuliulin. So I'm going to go with Christian Leroy Duncan by KO, 95% picked by Tapology, 81% by KO TKO. So I'm going to go with Christian Leroy Duncan, probably first or second round TKO. The cover of Lucas Alexander versus Jeka Saragih. I am going to go with Lucas Alexander. His only loss in the UFC was against Joanderson Brito. I guess he's only had 2 fights in the UFC, so his only loss is against Joanderson Brito, who's a really, really good prospect, and I'll get into his fight later against Jonathan Pearce. But again, a very good prospect. Lucas Alexander is a solid prospect. I would say Joanderson Brito is a really, really, really good prospect. So him losing that fight isn't necessarily a bad thing. Did beat Steven Peterson by decision, but Jeka Saragih in his last fight lost to Anshul Jubli by KO. Kind of just got ran through in that fight. And then we saw what Anshul Jubli did in his last fight, and he got beat up pretty badly. So that loss is not aging very well. It was 9 months ago as well. I'm going to have to go with Lucas Alexander. I guess Jeka Saragih can maybe get on the inside and maybe catch Lucas Alexander, because Lucas Alexander does keep his chin up at times. But I think Lucas Alexander can stay at range, use his jab, and then unload some combinations when Jeka Saragih misses and hurt him that way. I don't know if he's going to get the finish. It's kind of hit or miss with Lucas Alexander. Maybe the body kicks are just going to be a little bit too much for Jeka Saragih in like the second or third round. He starts to tire out and TKOs him that way. I can definitely see that, but I'm not necessarily confident in it. So I am going to go with a TKO. I'll probably stay a late second, early third round finish for Lucas Alexander. I think he'll just stay at range and he'll unload a bunch of body kicks to Jeka Saragih in this one. So I'm going to go with him in this. He has a 4-inch reach advantage as well. So kind of just goes to my point. I think he'll just stay at range and do some really good work on Jeka Saragih, who lost to Anshul Jubli. So Tapology picked Lucas Alexander as well, 85%, 53% by decision, 37% by TKO. Again, I can see it probably going either way with a KO or a decision, but I think he's just going to work the body of Jeka Saragih, and I think the combinations might be a little bit too much for him. So let's move on. Up the card with Charles Johnson versus Rafael Estevam. I am going to go with Charles Johnson. I believe he is an underdog, or at least from what I'm looking at from the Tapology picks, it does seem like he'll probably be an underdog in this fight. Estevam looked all right. He couldn't really take too much from his Contender Series fight because the guy he fought, I think, immediately tried to go for like a submission or whatever. He is good on the ground. He's good at controlling on the ground. However, he did find himself in a bunch of submissions that he was able to get out of, but it was kind of scary a little bit. If he does try to take down Charles Johnson, we know Charles Johnson has good takedown defense, and I think he can make it pretty make it a pretty decent fight on the feet. And I think he's enough of a veteran. I think he's fought like a few times this year. There's a point at the beginning of the year where he fought like once every month, I wanted to say it. That I was trying to calculate in my head, I guess. He beat Zagalo Zumagulov by split decision at the beginning of the year. Is that correct? It was either right before December or something like that. And then beat Jimmy Flick right after that. And then, less than, math. A month and 2 weeks later, he beat lost to Ode Osborne, and then lost to Cody Durden, who Cody Durden has actually looked pretty solid now. But I'm going to go with Charles Johnson. I think he's going to be a little bit more of a veteran. He's going to spoil this fight for Rafael Estevam. Estevam is 27 years of age. We haven't seen him in a year, so We don't know what it'll necessarily look like. Maybe he looks a lot better. I don't necessarily know why he's been out for a while, but I kind of want to see what he can bring to the table here. But I am just going to stick with Charles Johnson. I think he has good takedown defense, and I think he'll be, or at least outwork Estevam on the feet a little bit. So 76% picked by Tapology, 73% by decision, 14% by TKO/KO. I'm going to go with Charles Johnson by decision. The card, we had Chad Anheliger versus Jose Johnson. I'm going to go with Jose Johnson. I thought he looked really good against Jack Cartwright about a year ago on the Contender Series. Ended up losing to Damon Blackshear by a twister. I believe Damon Blackshear took that fight on short notice, I want to say. I actually kind of want to look this up so I don't get it wrong, but I believe he did take it on short notice. Is that right? I think I might be wrong. Did he come in on short notice? Is that what that was? No, because I thought it was about a week. No, he got the finish and then fought again against like Mario Batista the following week. So I think I got that one wrong. But he got twisted by Damon Blackshear, which isn't necessarily a good look. Chad Anheliger, so I don't mess up that name, Anheliger might look for some takedowns, but I think Jose Johnson did again. Very decent against Jack Cartwright on the ground, who I thought was a pretty good prospect in his own right about a year ago. So I think he can hang in there. Chad Anheliger is 37 years of age, just about. Going to be super old, especially for bantamweight. It's not something I really like to see. I think older bantamweights don't really belong in there necessarily anymore. Dominic Cruz is kind of hanging in there, but he hasn't fought in a very, very long time. Pedro Munoz, I guess, too, is a pretty solid fighter, but when you see the bantamweights get older, you can see a big giant speed difference. And I think Jose Johnson will just be a little bit too much here. I think he does have a pretty big reach advantage as well. I didn't even notice that at first. What is that, 7.5 inches of reach in this matchup. I think you'll just be able to keep a good distance, kind of just wait to counter for some of those takedown attempts from Chad Anheliger, and I think he gets the finish. Well, maybe not. I'll say decision. I think he does well against the takedowns. 59% picked by Tapology, 73% by decision. I'll probably just say decision. Maybe a late round finish. Who knows? We haven't seen Jose Johnson to fight too much other than him getting twisted. So it'd be nice to see what he looks like in this fight. But I'm going to go with Jose Johnson by decision. Up the card, we have one of the best fights on the card. Jonathan Pearce versus Joanderson Brito. I said this in my stream a little bit last weekend for the last card, if I can think of. Oh, yeah, UFC 295. Goodness. This is probably one of the best fights on the card. It is on the prelims for some really weird reason. You could easily make this one like right below the co-main event or the co-main event. I really enjoy I really do enjoy both of these fighters, and this fight is going to be really fun to watch. Jonathan Pearce hasn't fought in a year. It has felt longer for some reason. It felt the same way with Kizriev. I think it's only almost been 2 years for Kizriev as well, because those are two guys that I was like, oh, these guys are pretty solid, and I kept them in my mind. I'm like, where the hell are these guys fighting, like pullouts and all that? So it's nice to see Jonathan Pearce fight once again. He does kind of resemble Khabib a little bit. This picture does not do it justice, but if you look up Jonathan Pearce and look at one of those UFC photos that they make of like their face or whatever, you can see it quite a bit. He's like the American Khabib, not necessarily in the fighting style, but he weirdly does look like Khabib. So Joanderson Brito, I am going to pick him in this matchup though. Jonathan Pearce, I think, is way too hittable on the feet from what we last saw him. Maybe he'll be a lot better in this fight at not being as hittable, but Joanderson Brito I think is just too explosive. Good on the ground as well, really good jiu-jitsu. I think it'll just be a little bit too much for Jonathan Pearce. I just think the explosiveness will be way too much. Jonathan Pearce will be looking for takedowns, and I think Joanderson Brito will just outpower him. I am a little bit worried because Jonathan Pearce is actually a pretty durable fighter, even though he did get TKO'd by what's his name again? Joe Lozon. He got TKO'd by Joe Lozon, I think, his UFC debut. He's got some like weirdly good strength, although I do think Joanderson Brito could just outpower him and outmuscle him a little bit. So it is going to be interesting in that aspect to when Jonathan Pearce does look for takedowns, but I think Joanderson Brito can kind of just avoid that a little bit more. If Jonathan Pearce does do well in this fight, it'll probably just be him holding him against the fence. I think if it is on the feet, Joanderson Brito, the power will just be, I don't want to say it's a little bit too much because I think Pearce is pretty durable, but I think he'll definitely get beat up pretty badly. So I'm going to go with Joanderson Brito by decision. I think Pearce can take the shots. People are saying Brito by KO. I don't know. Maybe he can get the KO. Joe Lozon did get the the KO or the TKO, I'll say. Maybe he can catch him in this fight. It definitely is possible because he does have that power in his hands where he can absolutely flatline somebody. His only loss is Bill Algeo, which is not a bad loss to have at all. And the KO over Andre Philly is pretty good. The submission over Lucas Alexander, Weston Wilson. Recently, Weston Wilson's not that great, but still a nice looking KO. So I am going to go with Brito. Maybe he does find the finish in the later rounds, but I am going to go with Brito by decision. I think Jonathan Pearce is going to make this one a little bit ugly, try to keep it against the fence. He's going to be looking for takedowns, but he's not going to end up getting them. I think Brito, when they do separate, he's going to land some good shots, but I think after he lands some good shots, Pearce is just going to be looking for the clinch or whatever like that. So I am going to go with Brito by decision. I think it just turns into a really messy fight. So hopefully it's a really good one. I am really looking forward to it. I like both of these guys as prospects in the featherweight division. I can't remember if I put Jonathan Pearce. I think I did put Jonathan Pearce in my prospects video. I think I might have put Joanderson Brito as well. I can't remember off the top of my head, but these are two really good prospects coming up in featherweight. I can see them as both borderline top 15 fighters. Maybe Joanderson Brito can move up quite a bit now that that division's getting a little bit older. We'll see how that one goes, but Joanderson Brito, I think, is a pretty good prospect. I think is a better prospect than Jonathan Pearce at this point, who has not fought in a year. So let's move on. Of the card, we have Mick Parkin versus Kyle Machado. I'm going to go with Mick Parkin. He outstruck Jamal Pogues to a decision. I think he looks better than Kyle Machado. There's not much to say here. This is low-level heavyweight. Kyle Machado pretty much just outstruck and got out of a clinch against Kevin Slafarsky, who really didn't do too much to actually try to win the fight, and he was like massively overweight. I think Mick Parkin just can be a little bit more defensive, a little bit more technical, can be ready to land some really good shots on Kyle Machado after Kyle Machado opens up to try to strike Mick Parkin, if that kind of makes sense. Like I think Kyle Machado is going to be a little bit more offensive, but I think Mick Parkin is going to be defensively aware. And then right when Machado starts striking, looking for counters and combinations that way. So I'm going to go Mick Parkin by decision. If you're able to outstrike Jamal Pogues to a decision, who has looked good against these lower level heavyweights, I'm going to take you in this fight. So let's go Mick Parkin by decision. We have Lucie Pudilová versus Ailin Perez. I'm going to go with Lucie Pudilová. She lost to Jocelyn Edwards, who isn't a bad fighter. I think she's pretty solid, but compared to Ailin Perez's last win, although it was relatively dominant, it was against Ashley Evans Smith, and she won that one by decision. I think she probably should have been able to finish her. Lost to 70 Edgar bites, rear naked choke, and those are only two fights in the UFC. So Lucie Pudilová lost to Jocelyn Edwards by split decision, and I won't. Where do you even put Jocelyn Edwards with a Stephanie Edgar? I have no idea. But she did win against Yanan Wu as well, who I think is pretty solid in that division. So I am going to go Lucie Pudilová, maybe by finish. If not, probably, what am I saying by finish? Probably by decision. I'm going to be honest. This is women's MMA, low-level women's MMA. I'm going to go Lucie Pudilová by decision. I'm surprised people are taking Perez, but, I mean, I can honestly see it. So let's move on. Up the card, we have Nikolas Motta versus Trey Ogden. I'm going to go Trey Ogden. I don't think he's looked that bad. I kind of put a label on him a little bit like a year and a half ago when he first came in, saying that he didn't look too great, which is kind of true, but he has had some decent performance since then. He lost to Jordan Leavitt by split decision, beat Daniel Zahuber, which I actually think is a pretty solid win at this point. Daniel Zahuber actually looks pretty solid in the UFC so far. I think that's a pretty good decision win. Was a 12-0 fighter when he did beat him as well, so very impressive. About a year ago, I think I was watching James Krause's podcast, and he was like, I have to coach Trey Ogden. I was like, wow, good luck with that. And he ended up beating Daniel Zahuber, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So much has changed a year ago. So, but did lose to Ignacio Bahamondes. Did make that one at least a little bit competitive, but Ignacio Bahamondes was a little bit too much for Trey Ogden. Nikolas Motta, though, lost to Manuel Torres by KO. Beat Cameron Van Camp, which, what does that really mean? I mean, Cameron Van Camp is not good at all. He shouldn't have never been in the UFC. Just had no chin at all. I mean, pretty impressive on the feet, and I know I did pick him to win a couple fights, but he just wasn't impressive with his chin, at least. Like, his chin was just so bad that it wasn't even worth picking him at all. And then he lost to Jim Miller by KO as well. So I'm going to go Trey Ogden. I don't think he's as bad as Nikolas Motta. I think it'll just be a little bit too much. I don't think he gets the finish either. I hope this one will probably go to a decision. He's going to be 4 years older and will have a 1.5 inch reach advantage, but I just don't see him finishing Nikolas Motta. I'm going to take him by decision. 66% picked by Tapology, 79% by decision. I'm going to go with that as well. Up the card, we have Amanda Ribas versus Luana Pinheiro. I'm going to go with Amanda Ribas. She's actually looked pretty decent in her fights. She lost to Macy Barber by KO, but she does have a win over Viviane Araújo and a win over Virna Jandiroba, which I actually think are two pretty solid wins. I think Viviane Araújo fought against Grasso, was it before or no, it was after her fight with Grasso, right? In that main event fight that they tried to convince us was a main event fight. I know Grasso's a champ, but I'm just putting that out there. Yeah, she lost to Alexa Grasso and then lost to Amanda Ribas. I just think those are better wins. Luana Pinheiro, beat Michelle Waterson-Gomez by split decision, who hasn't looked that good recently. Beat Sam Hughes by decision, beat Random Marcos by upkick in the one-on Contender Series. Again, if you're winning against Virna Jandiroba, who I think is like ranked now and has actually looked pretty good recently, you went to a split decision with Caitlin Chookagian, beat Viviane Araújo. I'm going to take you in this fight. I mean, I don't think the resumes are comparable as well. She's 30 years of age. They're both 30 years of age. While before in reach advantage, I think she's going to win this fight by decision. 72% picked by Tapology. I agree. Let's move on. Up the card, we have Payton Talbott versus Nick Aguirre. I'm going to go with Payton Talbott. He was on this year's Contender Series. He looked super impressive. I kind of compared him to Sean O'Malley a little bit. It's not like necessarily a hand speed because I don't think anybody has the hand speed of Sean O'Malley in the UFC. It's absolutely incredible. But Payton Talbott, like just the way he fights is just so similar. I mean, he does walk forward and try to take punches. Like he has a good chin and he knows he has a good chin. So he's just going to walk forward and try to eat your shots and then just come at you. But like the way he throws punches, this combination is very similar to Sean O'Malley. So he's going to be looking very, very good in this fight against a guy in Nick Aguirre who I don't think is that good at all. He lost to Dan Argueta by decision, who Dan Argueta is a pretty solid fighter, honestly, but I just think Payton Talbott would just be a little bit too much. He did show his takedown defense in his last fight. It has definitely got better against, what is it, Junior Cortez? It says Reyes Cortez, but I think it is Junior Cortez, who is the brother of Tracy Cortez. So he did look good in that fight, looked really good on the feet, decent takedown defense. I think he can beat up Nick Aguirre and win by finish. I'll say by finish. I think he does get the finish. The UFC will really love this guy. I think Dana White already loved him. He saw the money flying in the air after his fight in the Contender Series. So he's definitely gonna get this guy built up a little bit. It has at bantamweight, so he's already got his guy at the top of the division, Sean O'Malley. But they're definitely gonna be building up this guy, Payton Talbott, quite a bit. So keep an eye out on him. He's 25 years of age as well, so he's still super young. Will be at a 3.5-inch reach disadvantage in this fight, but I'm going to take him in this one by finish. 92% picked by Tapology, 58% by KO, 33% by decision. I'm going to go with Payton Talbott probably by second or third round TKO. Up the card, we have Jordan Leavitt versus Chase Hooper. And now this is some beautiful matchmaking. I mean, you can't think of any better matchmaking than this. It's just one of these fights that you kind of just have to see before you die, you know. Jordan Leavitt versus Chase Hooper. Jordan Leavitt has actually looked pretty good on the feet recently. I don't want to say they're similar fighters, but like, I don't want to say similar people either, but I don't know. I just think this is a really weird fight. Grappling wise, I'll say they're even. Maybe Chase Hooper might be a little bit better. Maybe Jordan Leavitt might be a little bit better. Jordan Leavitt might be a little bit better in the wrestling. Maybe Chase Hooper will be better in the grappling. I don't know. I do think Jordan Leavitt will be better on the feet, though, and he does have the possibility to KO Chase Hooper. Has Chase Hooper gotten KO'd? I guess he got KO'd against Steve Garcia. It was just ground punches, though, so maybe Jordan Leavitt can do the same here. I can see him winning by decision, though. I don't think he has the power that Steve Garcia does have. Chase Hooper just beat Nick Fiore, who isn't that great of a fighter, so I'm not going to say too much there, but Jordan Leavitt beat Victor Martinez by KO. His striking looked a lot better. He's been training quite a bit. He's been training with Sean Strickland, so maybe he'll show all that testosterone in this fight against a guy in Chase Hooper. I'm not going to say what I was going to say. So he will be 4 years older than Chase Hooper, will be at 3-inch reach disadvantage, but I do think he's just going to be better on the feet. Chase Hooper's just so sloppy on the feet and kind of similarly on the ground. I just think Jordan Leavitt will just be a little bit too much on the feet, so I'm going to go with Jordan Leavitt in this fight. 55% picked by Tapology, 69% by decision, 45% picked Hooper is for Tapology here by decision as well. So, okay. Again, super weird fight. I guess Tapology is pretty split around it, but I just think Jordan Leavitt has looked a little bit better on the feet, has looked to improve his game a lot more recently. So Chase Hooper's still pretty young. We'll see what his career looks like. He has looked better at 155, but I'm going to go with Jordan Leavitt in this one. The card we have Jake Matthews versus Michael Morales. I am going to go with Michael Morales in this fight. I think he's going to be a little bit better on the feet. Well, how do I want to say this? Michael Morales will have a 7-inch reach advantage. I think he's going to be able to use distance on the feet a little bit better than Jake Matthews. Jake Matthews is really good on the feet. However, his chin has been a little bit suspect. Michael Morales does have some really good pop in his shots. Does have a little bit of a wrestling game as well. 24 years of age, super young, from Ecuador, one of the younger Ecuadorian prospects coming into the UFC. Hasn't really showed off his wrestling too much. Like, he does use it. He's used it a couple times. I think he used it in his last fight against Max Griffin, if I remember correctly. Used it against Adam Puget after he won by KO. But struggled a little bit against Max Griffin in his last fight, but then started to come on a little bit more and looked a little bit more impressive. I kind of said I wanted to see him use a little bit more kicks because he's super athletic, super long legs as well. I think he can definitely implement that a little bit later on in his career. I want to see him be able to use range a little bit better. But he does use his hands quite a bit, so it does worry me against a guy like Jake Matthews. But I think he can use his reach quite a bit in this matchup and kind of frustrate Jake Matthews. I think he uses wrestling if he wants to. I don't see him using his wrestling, but if he ever wanted to, he probably could take down Jake Matthews and control him on the ground there and beat him up and try and just outpoint him there. I wouldn't see him finishing Jake Matthews on the ground unless he knocked him down and then just got a TKO to ground strikes there. But I'm going to go with Michael Morales by TKO in the second round. I don't know how I feel about Jake Matthews' chin. I know it is I know it is Matthew Semmelsberger. Actually, Matthew Semmelsberger has a lot of power, and he couldn't finish Jake Matthews. So I'm actually going to go with a decision for Michael Morales in this fight. I don't think he finishes Jake Matthews. Jake Matthews does have a solid chin. It isn't a great one, but he wasn't able to get finished by Matthew Semmelsberger, so who does have a lot of power. I think he ends up winning this fight by decision. I think he implements his grappling later on in this fight. I do think he lands some really good shots on Jake Matthews, but I think he doesn't end up finishing him. So I'm going to go with Michael Morales by decision. 87% picked by Tapology, 55% picked for decision, 35% by TKO KO. Let's move on. Up the card to our main event, we have Brendan Allen versus Paul Craig. I am going to go with Brendan Allen, but I can weirdly see a way where he knocks down Paul Craig and then jumps into his guard and then gets submitted. I feel like, or at least old Brendan Allen would do something kind of dumb like that. But Brendan Allen has looked super impressive, especially recently. He's done a really good job in the UFC, definitely developing quite a bit. 27 years of age, almost 28. Paul Craig, almost 36 years of age after going down to middleweight after fighting at light heavyweight for a very long time. Beat Andre Muniz by KO in a very weird fight again, where both guys were not that great on the feet, and it was just a very sloppy fight. I think Brendan Allen's just going to be a little bit too fast on the feet for Paul Craig. I think he's going to end up catching him. Paul Craig doesn't have the best of chins. However, he is really good on the ground. He did submit Magomed Ankalaev at one point, I believe. Let's see if I can pull it up. Magomed Ankalaev won by triangle choke in the third round with the last second in there. So pretty decent submission win there. Very weird fight again, but I can definitely see Brendan Allen hurting him and then jumping into his guard and then just getting submitted. But Brendan Allen, very good at getting control. I believe he did fight Andre Muniz and submitted him, which is also very interesting because Paul Craig could not do that at all, and he has really good submission skills off his back. So weird fight again for Brendan. I think Andre Muniz ended up outstriking Brendan Allen, and Brendan Allen ended up controlling him and submitting him. Very, very weird fight. Both of these guys are very weird fighters. I just think he's just going to be a little bit too much on the feet. I think he's going to end up TKOing Paul Craig. I hope he doesn't land in his guard because then it's just super dangerous for him, but maybe he can kind of survive that a little bit, I guess. But I think if he TKOs him, I think he'll land the strikes necessary to take out Paul Craig. So I'm going to go with a second round TKO. I think he catches Paul Craig, if not the first round. Honestly, if you're able to TKO Bruno Silva, or not TKO him, I guess he hurt him very badly on the feet, got him to the ground, and then submitted him with a rear naked choke. If you're able to do what he did to Bruno Silva on the feet with a lot of power, who just, I believe, came off a win against Brad Tavares right before then. Pretty impressive win. I think you can do the same to Paul Craig for sure on the feet. And I think because he is pretty solid on the ground, I think he can avoid some of the dangerous positions from Paul Craig. I feel like that's a lot of weights with a lot of fighters, but then they end up getting caught in it. But Brendan Allen, I think is just going to be too much on the feet. Going to drop him and maybe just TKO Paul Craig on the ground. I think that happens in the second round. I think he hurts Paul Craig in the first. Doesn't jump into his guard, but I think it happens again. And he ends up finishing him on the ground. So I'm going to go second round TKO for Brendan Allen. 72% picked by Tapology, 60% by TKO, 16% by submission, 17% by decision. So that's my pick for this card. Let me know who you guys think wins in the main event down below, and I'll see you guys next time.